I'm Dr. Jay Anders, and this is Tell Me Where It Hurts, where we discuss some of the big challenges in health IT and how we can solve them so clinicians can do what they do best, care for patients. I'd like to welcome everyone back to another episode of Tell Me Where It Hurts. Today's guest is someone who has been on before and somebody that I've known for now over 20 years, and also the company that he is the CEO of is the sponsor of this podcast. So thank you for that opportunity for the last 3 years we've been doing this. So without much ado, I will introduce Dave Lareau, who is the CEO of Medicomp Systems. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Thank you, Jay. Great to be here.
So it's been a while since you've been on. I think you were guest number 2 way back when we started this, and things have changed over the last 3 years or so, actually at warp speed. So there's a lot of things we can talk about, but give us a little background about where Medicomp has come from and where Medicomp is going here for, just a brief description.
Okay. Well, Medicomp started 47 years now ago, where Peter Goltra said, doctors work diagnostically, and can we build something that docs can use at the point of care, which presents relevant information when they need it for any condition that is relevant in that encounter. So he started building what has now become Medicomp's clinical knowledge graph. And over the years, it has morphed from you can use a Scantron form in the late 70s to bubble in the thing like you're taking an SAT test, put it through, and it'll create a document for you. Then you can build a Windows form in VB5, and then you can do it on the web with web components. And now it's you can just intake text, use natural language processing to get to structured data, and then finish all the downstream applications like quality measures, billing codes, etc., summarization of the record. But the key thing that we have seen over the last 3 years since we last talked is the explosion of AI for use at the point of care, particularly with ambient listening. Now, that has removed the burden of creating the documentation, but you still need to act upon the information in it. And that's what we've been focusing on now for the last 3 years. We're starting to see some really exciting stuff from some of our customers in using ambient listening technologies for the documentation, and then converting that to items that intersect with our clinical knowledge graph to finish a lot of the downstream workflow stuff. We have a couple of pilots out in that now. And one of the things that we've realized is, wait a minute, that encounter does not exist in a vacuum. There's other information about this patient out there. And oh my God, now you're going to receive it. It's going to come in because interoperability is real, and TEFC is real, and QHINs are real, and HIEs are real, and you're now going to be responsible for all that incoming stuff. And what we're finding is that people need tools to clean up that data. We call it dirty data. It's all over the place, and it's in 7 or 8 different coding systems. If it is data, Loinc, SNOMED, RX Norm, CPT, you name it. So our engine has the ability to help clean up that data, not only as it comes in, but as it goes out. So we're seeing, we initially saw AI like everybody else in this industry. We were scared to death of it. Everybody was. People still are. It's replacing jobs. Microsoft just announced yesterday they're laying off 9,000 people. 30% of their code is written by AI. I mean, it's coming, but it doesn't do everything. And you need to be able to take the output of these models and make them usable for people in their environment. That includes the incoming information, that includes what you're seeing in front of you, and that includes all of the regulatory requirements that you see. So we are neck deep in this stuff, and it's fun, it's scary, it's exhilarating, and the lack of attention to the quality of what's produced is very concerning.
Well, let's break that down just a little bit, because you brought up several things we can talk about. But let's talk about the ambient listening revolution. I'll call it that. And recently, this whole week, I've been talking to folks about ambient listening, what it can do and what it can't do. and how it's going to fit into workflows going forward. So tell us a little bit about where Medicomp is going to fit into that particular process, because it's fraught with error. I mean, in the best of cases, it's 80%. So what's Medicomp going to do to help solve some of that error rate and gamish that some of these systems produce?
Well, Jay, last time I checked, you were a physician, right? With a lot of experience. You managed one of the largest, you were the managing director of one of the largest primary care practices in the United States. Okay. And my guess is most of the time when you or somebody working, another physician or nurse working in your enterprise was seeing a patient, they pretty much knew what they were going to do, right? They had a pretty good idea of what to do. They had a really good idea of what to document. They didn't need a lot of help from the computer to do that, but the process of documentation was a burden. They had to dictate it, or they had to type it, or in the old days, they had to point and click on a fixed form, which we had people doing back in the late 70s and early 80s. Nobody wants to do that anymore. They want the technology to help them with the burden of creating the documentation. They don't need help, figuring out what to document. They just needed help getting it into the system, previously on a piece of paper, but now in a system. And ambient listening has really helped with that, combined with patient portals to get in some of the history and bring it together. Now, one of the issues with that is large language models, are used largely in these ambient listening technologies. They're designed to come up with an answer. Okay. Most of the time it's right, but sometimes it's not. So you need a trusted source to filter that and identify things. Wait a minute. This says this patient has, in my case, on a recent visit, liver cancer. But wait a minute. You, as a doc, know the signs of liver cancer, and you just finished an encounter with me, and you know I don't have liver cancer. You know it. You know it. Okay. Wouldn't it be great if the technology could take that now text document in and say, hold it. We've run this through a natural language processing or a parsing algorithm. Okay. And there's many of them out there. People can pick their own. And it says, here's what this patient, here's things in this record for this patient. And because I had mentioned that my father died of liver cancer, it came through as a diagnosis in my record. And the only reason I caught it was the nurse said, "You look like you're really doing well." I said, well, thank you. Being a proud male, I said, "Well, thank you very much." And she said, "No, I mean, with the cancer, how long have you been in remission?" And that's when I discovered that the technology output that I had liver cancer, when in fact it was in liver cancer was mentioned in the record, in the transcript, but it came through as a code of a diagnosis of liver cancer for me, which was going to cause me great problems if they didn't correct it, if I ever needed to get any kind of insurance, any kind of clearance, etc. So we're really excited that our clinical knowledge graph and the technologies, we can attach that to the output of an LLM and filter it for relevance and highlight things that the clinician should look at and say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's not right."
Now,
So
one of the things about that text document that all these ambient systems produce, it's nothing more than a bunch of text. It's not coded. There's a myriad of things out there that practices, clinicians have to attend to, like quality measures, HCCs, things like that. Tell me a little bit about how Medicomp is getting us from that text document, which we have to correct it, absolutely. But once it is corrected, what can we do with that data once we have it as data?
well, there are a number of solutions out there for what people call natural language processing, NLP, to convert text to data. We work with several. One of our preferred providers is Intelligent, which has done a model of their NLP specifically to identify our concepts from our clinical knowledge engine that exist in that text document. Once we have that, we have had 4 or 5 people working for at least 10 years to build a clinical quality measure evaluation service, which evaluates the data coming out of an encounter and says, well, wait a minute, these are the quality measures that this provider signed up for, or this enterprise. These are the ones that apply to this patient. And in the text there, it shows that, yeah, you did a retinal exam, you did this, you did that, you did an diabetic eye exam. It's documented in your record, and you've met that condition, et cetera. But for this other quality measure you signed up for, there were 4 things required to document. You've got 3 of them. Here's the one that's missing. Boom, you're done. Okay, so it's an augmentation of the process of not only caring for a patient, but making sure you meet all of the downstream requirements.
And one of the things as a provider that I always hated is in the days of dictation or whatever, when they would come back and say, hey, you missed something, or this is a wrong code or whatever, correcting that sometimes can be really, really hard. So, and time consuming. So having that done at the point of care is quite an advantage to do that. So let's go a little bit to another functionality that is starting to, I'm going to say rear its ugly head. Really, it's not. Charts, my internal medicine charts, if you looked at them with paper, sometimes there were 3 volumes that were maybe 2.5 inches thick, each volume. So there's a lot of data. When you have all that data, the problem is you can't see anything in there quickly. And a lot of EMRs today are constructed like that, where it's siloed. It's spread all over the place. It's in this list or that list or this section or that section. You got to go searching for it. So tell us a little bit about how Medicomp is starting to address the fact of taking a chart, all the chart, and doing summary. And then we'll talk a little bit about AI and some of its advantages and disadvantages.
Well, I mentioned earlier that we have this clinical knowledge graph, and the core of that is what we refer to internally as our index. And our index is a linkage between one aspect of it is a linkage between a diagnosis, and the concepts that are relevant to the evaluation or treatment of that diagnosis. What symptoms are consistent? What history items? What physical exam, tests, diagnosis, therapies, comorbidities, sequela, et cetera, you want to be paying attention to. So if you have a patient, and unfortunately, more and more of the US population, the patients have, as they get over 60, have multiple conditions. So you've seen a variety of providers in a variety of settings. You've been treated by a cardiologist for your AFib, and you're treated for a kidney disease by your nephrologist. You also have asthma. You occasionally go to a pulmonologist. There's stuff all over the place. And most EHRs silo that information, as you said, into different, if you looked at the EHR on the screen, different tabs. But, patients aren't a series of tabs. They're a collection of information, and it's all linked. But when you're a clinician, sometimes you just want to see the diabetes status of this patient. Do they have any tingling in the extremities? Is their vision blurring? Does their breath smell like acetone, or is it fruity? What's their A1C? What's their blood glucose? What are their other levels? And you just, in a typical EHR, you're looking all over the place for that. So you end up just giving up, okay? Or you just copy it from the last encounter. But with a knowledge graph and clinical knowledge engine with the right data, just ask for, by voice or click, say, show me a short list of the diabetes key indicators for this patient. And there they are. They're all together on the screen. It just finds them. And do you want to see the latest one, or do you want to see the trends for 3 or 4 of them and how they're connected? So once you have that data and you have those linkages available to you, you don't have to search the record anymore. You can just kind of say or click on what you want to see, and it'll show it to you.
So
otherwise, it's hidden.
Yeah. So right now, to that end, there are, I don't know how many companies now. I've seen at least 2 or 3 dozen that have been doing this. They're taking the AI LLM and they're throwing all that data in there and telling the LLM to summarize this for me, to do exactly what you just said. So let's talk a little bit about what's different, what the Medicomp approach is, and what a pure AI summarization is.
Okay, a pure AI summarization is pretty much and I'll say this, a constantly but gradually improving, you know, utility to take a record and look at all of the similar records out there and filter it accordingly and summarize it. And where it might be missing a piece of information, it may just insert one. Okay. Now, some people call those hallucinations, some call them made up, whatever. It may. Okay. And as you said, I mean, I don't have the latest information. It changes every week on the level of hallucinations, but uh, it basically takes its best, very educated guess at what in the record is relevant for this condition. Okay? And most of the time it gets it right, most of the time, but sometimes it doesn't. Uh, and sometimes it leaves out a key indicator that you might need. Sometimes it puts one in there that didn't exist. And how do you know? So our approach is a little bit different. We use our clinical knowledge graph, and one of the things that is causing people to turn to us is they need to trust the information they get. They need to trust it, and they also need, and this is starting to happen now. People are starting to say, you know, the summarization of these charts, these huge charts, is going to cost a lot of money if we keep paying for millions of tokens to process this stuff every time somebody wants to see, give me the diabetes indicators for a patient, because that's going to happen a lot. So our engine, we use the internal links in our engine, which are 10 clinicians or so have been curating by researching evidence and providing links to that evidence if anybody wants to look at it. So over time, people come to trust that much more for summarization and access to targeted, clinically specific information about a disease than they're getting out of these models.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to someone very recently about was just that fact that what it doesn't know, it makes up and just inserts. Or I'm more concerned as a clinician on the omissions, meaning that it didn't pick up something that I know is in that medical record somewhere, but it just didn't present it to me. A study was just done talking about how accurate these are, that they're accurate 80% of the time. Now, 80% is going to get you a C plus, B minus if you're going to school. So let's talk about healthcare for a minute. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't want my healthcare to be B minus. I would like it to be A plus. So this thing you're talking about, building trust in the system, I think is extremely important. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we have right now with LLM implementations that I've been seeing, is that lack of trust. So in Medicomp's approach, it's a little different.
It is. And if somebody wants to see the basis on which we presented the information, they can just ask the engine and say, show me the sources for your information and show me the actual information that you were looking for. And there it is. You can see a list of it. Say it's based on this. Now, occasionally somebody will call up and say, I'm operating as you did. I think you went to what? Kazakhstan? Where'd you go on your
Kazakhstan?
I'm operating. I'm seeing a patient in Kazakhstan, and you guys are missing something for this diagnosis that is relevant only to people in Kazakhstan. Well, that's great. So we'll add that in, we'll add a reference to it, etc. But people come to trust the sources and references and the transparency with which we present our summary information. It's not a black box. You can see what's in the box if you care to look.
So let's turn the tide just a little bit. Let's talk about interoperability and dirty data, which is now becoming a real issue. And I know Medicomp's working on a new process to address some of that. So let's talk about how Medicomp's solutions fit into the fact that if you have, say, that liver cancer that's in your medical record, and it goes through and it gets passed off to XYZ clinic, and they get to see that Dave Lareau has liver cancer, but there's nothing in the chart that will support that. So how is Medicomp going to fit in, try to clean up that dirty data?
Well, a couple ways. First of all, the information coming in, as you said, has massively duplicated. Okay. You might, if somebody has asthma, you might have 7 or 8 different codes or diagnoses for that asthma, depending on the quality of who coded it. Okay. It might it might be asthma exacerbated. I mean, ICD-10 gets so specific. Some people bother to get specific, some people don't. Okay. So you might have, if you have a patient who's been treated somewhere for 5 or 6 years, you might have 25 or 30 encounters, okay, with 8 different asthma things presented, and which one is the right one? Who knows? So first of all, and there are people that are really pretty good now. Some of these utilities are really good at deduplicating, but you're still going to have, even if you deduplicate 80 instances of a code, you're still going to have 7 different coding variations. So we have a hierarchical structure which puts those together and says, wait a minute, it's most likely to be this one. Okay. We've used AI internally to say, well, wait a minute. We not only want to get this coded correctly for every way that we describe something, like say difficulty breathing, dyspnea, SOB, shortness of breath. We want to find any way anybody ever said it in this patient's record, and a wide variety. So we've actually used AI to help build our synonymy engine, so that we can find anything that sounds like that diagnosis. Then we can structure it hierarchically and pick the one that's most likely to be right, and give a confidence level so that people can learn to trust the information that they're seeing in front of them. And that solving that problem for one of our current customers was what led to our new product Alchemy, which uses our engine. It also uses some LLM technology to clean up existing or incoming data. And we're focused on the diagnostic or problem list category now, but we're about to expand into medications, labs, etc.
It's a fascinating project, and I've had the pleasure of helping you work on that now for a while.
Now that we're getting somewhere, it's a pleasure. But I
At the beginning, it was a little
I
like
remember
pulling
when we started, it was kind of, oh my God, what are we doing here? Right?
Yeah, those 27,000 row spreadsheets were interesting to go through. So Medicomp is not just in the US.
No.
It's a global company. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit, well, first, the differences between what American healthcare is like and what healthcare is in other parts of the world that Medicomp deals with. And then tell our listeners what Medicomp has helped do in that part of the world.
Well, one of the huge differences is cost. In the rest of the world, we base our pricing outside the United States on the per capita healthcare spend as a percentage of what's in the US. So we take our US pricing, and for example, per capita healthcare cost in one country might be $4,000 a year per person. In the United States, it's getting close to 13,000. So outside the US, people aren't going to pay as much for these systems as they do here. So that's one huge difference. Okay. Also, another big difference is there's not a dominant legacy vendor with what might be obsolete technology embedded in 80% of the large enterprise systems in the rest of the world. Okay, there's not. Okay, so when we get approached by somebody from, say, we just did a project in Malaysia with IJN Hospital, 300-bed hospital, couple thousand providers from the time of contract signing to the time they went live was 8 weeks, because we didn't have to fight uphill against embedding it in a vendor's technology where they really didn't want anybody else involved in the system. Okay? They wanted to control everything. So there's much less of a legacy system overhang and needing to fit into that. But there's also the fact that it's more of a blank slate there when you go in. They're using either straight dictation, or they're still typing, or in some cases just doing a minimal amount of charting. But all of a sudden, they want to get HIMSS MRAM stage 6 or stage 7. They want nursing, electronic nursing documentation. But the biggest difference is they actually want coordination of care between all providers, all clinicians, all nurses, all auxiliary medical providers. They want to see the patient's conditions and treatment plan, enter information once, see it everywhere, filtered by role, filtered by task, filtered by condition, etc. And because they're starting from a blank slate with a clinical knowledge engine inside of it, it's much easier and faster for them to get there. So one of the things we've learned from that is we have to make this incredible tool that they're using with our stuff available to be plugged, added onto existing systems here in the US rather than embedded in them. Okay, so I know you're going to ask me later, what's one thing I would change about healthcare? And one thing I change here, it might not be the most important thing, is I would like to see systems open up more to using capabilities of outside utilities and vendors that they don't currently support or don't want inside their walled garden. I'd love to see that. So we're learning from doing business globally how to make that easier, because the vendors that are established in Asia, for example, they're not as resistant to including newer technologies to add to their infrastructure rather than embed inside it. So it's been really fun and interesting to do that work, and then try to figure out how we can make those same capabilities available in an environment here in the US where there are more significant walls around what's already there.
Interestingly, you say that one of the big issues has been the actual opening up of those systems. There's pipes now created. We've got QHINs, we've got HIEs. They're all over the place. And it's interesting to see how some of these systems have, I'm going to call faked it, because they're sending you a PDF of somebody's medical record, which is not useful when I receive it. It's 4, 5, 6, 8 pages of something I have to read and try to figure out what's inside of it. One of the things that's unique about Asia and other parts of the world is those systems were almost always created for clinical care first, not billing.
That's right.
Whereas in the United States, the systems were created for getting a bill out and not really for care of the patient. I start to see that starting to import itself over here a little bit more, but boy, that's a tough go to think about.
It is a tough go, and over the last few years, you've seen the explosion in cost in Medicare Advantage, because with the focus still on, hey, let's upcode this. How do we upcode this so that we get paid more per year for managing that patient's care? And that's become a matter of a subject of attention now, I would say, but still not much enforcement. But now, to pick up on your theme again about the focus on billing and reimbursement here, now they're focusing some of the AI models not on helping the clinicians necessarily, but helping them to streamline the pre-authorization process for, is this going to be paid if we do it? Right? Not necessarily what to do, but is this going to be paid if we do it? So, but you are seeing it slowly start to shift to, okay, are we providing the quality of care that we need to drive the costs down? And we're still not doing that yet here, but we have to. We have to. I wish I had the answer to that, but we have to do that. We have to figure out how to do that. Not only how to get paid for what we do, but how to do the thing that's most effective to bring down the total cost of care for that patient over a lifetime of treatment. So there you go.
Interestingly, you brought up the pre-authorization. I just read an article this morning, actually, that it was entitled "Denials at the Speed of Light." Meaning they're throwing an AI system at your medical records to see how they can say, well, we're just not going to pay for this, or it's duplicate care, or you didn't have step kits. It was amazing to read how that's actually being applied. Well, we're coming up kind of on the end of our time here, and you already told me what you would change if you could. So is there anything else you'd like the listeners of the podcast to know?
I would like them to know that there are solutions coming up. We have one, other people might, to get, clean, consistent data that's usable by clinicians at the point of care, that's transparent, reliable, and this is a big one, and nobody's really talking about it yet, at acceptable cost, acceptable operating cost. We are doing a pilot right now with one of our customers, and they have scaled back somewhat their plans for the use of AI with our stuff. I mean, we're integrating the two of them, but they said we'd like to be able to get away with not paying as much for the cost. When they started to look at over a 30,000 patient population, what they were going to be paying in transaction costs to summarize 30,000 records on an ongoing basis, they basically got sticker shock, and it came back to us and said, how can you help us reduce that cost but still yet be transparent and reliable? And that's our focus. So we're having fun doing it, and it's a wild ride.
So Dave, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and talk a little bit more about what Medicomp does and provides, how would they do that?
Well, we're on Twitter, LinkedIn. Medicomp.com is our website. You contact us. I'm sure that our Director of Business Development, James Ida, will respond to you, and we can pick it up from there.
Dave, as always, it's a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for supporting it for the last 3 years.
Okay, it's been great. It's great to see, Jay, what you've turned it into, right? You got
Thanks.
an award. You got an award a couple of years ago, and I do have to admit that I'm always nervous when I do these, but you have a way of putting people at ease and guiding us in the right direction. So thank you for
that. Thanks for being on. That's all for today. Thanks for listening to Tell Me Where It Hurts. Tune in to Healthcare Now Radio and Podcast Network each month for the latest episode. To learn more about Medicomp Systems, visit our website at www.medicomp.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at MedicompSys or myself at MedicompDoc, or check out the show notes for links. See you next time.